The hot Texas sun beat down mercilessly on construction foreman Mike Rodriguez as he guided his excavator through the rich soil of what used to be the Thompson family's backyard in Cedar Park, a quiet suburb of Austin. The old house was being demolished to make way for a new shopping complex, and Mike had done this kind of work hundreds of times before. But this sunny March morning would be different. The excavator's blade struck something that didn't feel right. In his 20 years of experience, Mike knew the difference between hitting a rock and hitting something else. He climbed down from his machine and walked over to investigate, his boots leaving deep impressions in the disturbed earth. What he found made his blood run cold. Partially unearthed by his machine was a small metal box, roughly the size of a shoebox. It might have been unremarkable except for one detail. There was a tiny bracelet dangling from its rusted corner, the kind hospitals put on newborn babies. Mike's hands trembled as he called the police. Within hours, the former Thompson property was crawling with law enforcement. The Cedar Park Police Department had cordoned off the area with yellow crime scene tape, and forensics teams worked methodically under pop-up tents to shield their work from both the sun and prying eyes. Detective Sarah Martinez stood over the box as crime scene technicians carefully photographed and documented its position. She'd been with the department for 15 years, but something about this case made her stomach churn. The baby bracelet had a date on it, June 15, 2003. What we've got here, the forensics lead told her, is essentially a time capsule, and whatever's inside has been waiting 20 years to tell its story. 20 years earlier, the Thompson family seemed to have it all. James Thompson was a successful real estate developer, his wife Linda was active in the local church, and their 3 children, Jason, 17, Emma, 15, and Katie, 12, were good students and athletes. They lived in a beautiful 2-story home with a sprawling backyard that was the envy of the neighborhood. But behind the perfect facade, things weren't quite what they seemed. Emma Thompson, their middle child, had always been different from her siblings. While Jason and Katie were outgoing and social, Emma was quieter, more reserved. She spent most of her time alone in her room, writing in her diary and listening to music. Her parents chalked it up to typical teenage behavior. But there was more to Emma's withdrawal than normal adolescent angst. In January 2003, Emma started wearing baggier clothes. She ate dinner in her room more often, claiming schoolwork kept her busy. Her mother noticed she'd stopped joining the family for their Sunday swims in the backyard pool. When Linda tried to talk to her daughter, Emma would quickly change the subject or find an excuse to leave the room. Looking back, the signs were there. But the Thompsons were masters at avoiding uncomfortable truths. On a warm night in June 2003, while the rest of the family slept, 15-year-old Emma Thompson gave birth alone in her bathroom. She'd managed to hide her pregnancy from everyone, even her mother. The baby came quickly, barely making a sound. Emma sat on the cold tile floor holding her newborn daughter, terrified and confused. The baby was tiny but perfect, with delicate fingers and a dusting of dark hair. For a brief moment, Emma allowed herself to imagine keeping her. But reality crashed in like a tidal wave. She was just a kid herself, and her parents. What would they say? In that moment of panic and fear, Emma made a decision that would haunt her for the next 20 years. She wrapped the baby in towels and crept downstairs. The house was silent, except for the distant hum of the air conditioner. In the garage, she found an old metal box that once held her father's important papers. Her hands shaking, she placed the baby inside, along with the hospital bracelet she'd saved from her own birth, the only thing she had to give her daughter. The backyard soil was soft from recent rain. Emma dug until her hands were raw, then carefully placed the box in the ground. As she covered it with dirt, her tears mixed with the earth. By sunrise, the only evidence of what had happened was a slightly darker patch of soil near the old oak tree. Emma went back to her room, showered, and crawled into bed. When her mother called her for breakfast a few hours later, she said she had a stomach bug. She stayed in bed for 2 days, and no one questioned it. Life in the Thompson household continued as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Detective Martinez sat at her desk, staring at the photos from the crime scene. The metal box had been carefully transported to the medical examiner's office, where they confirmed what everyone feared. It contained the remains of a newborn baby girl. The investigation began with tracking down the Thompson family. James and Linda had divorced in 2010, each remarrying and moving to different states. Jason was a successful attorney in Houston, Katie was teaching elementary school in California, and Emma had seemingly vanished. Martinez's first interview was with Linda Thompson, now Linda Carson, who flew in from Florida as soon as she got the call. "I can't believe this," Linda kept saying, her hands clutching a tissue. "We lived in that house for 15 years. How could we not know?" The detective studied the woman carefully. "Mrs. Carson, did you notice anything unusual in your family around June 2003? Linda started to shake her head, then stopped. "Emma, she went through a phase that year. More withdrawn than usual. But teenagers, you know, we thought it was normal." "When was the last time you spoke to Emma?" Linda's face crumpled. "She left home right after graduating high school in 2006. She calls on Christmas, sends birthday cards, but she's never come back to Texas. We haven't seen her in person since she left." The next day, Martinez interviewed James Thompson. He was defensive from the start. "We were a good family," he insisted. "This must be some kind of mistake." But when Martinez showed him the baby bracelet found with the box, his facade cracked. That's impossible. That's Emma's bracelet from when she was born. She kept it in her jewelry box." The pieces were starting to come together. It took 3 weeks to locate Emma Thompson. She was living under her married name in a small town in Oregon, working as a librarian. When Detective Martinez called, Emma's response was telling. "I've been waiting for this call for 20 years, she said quietly. Emma agreed to fly to Texas immediately. When she walked into the Cedar Park Police Department, Martinez was struck by how young she still looked at 35. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, and her eyes carried the weight of someone who'd been carrying a heavy secret for far too long. In the interview room, Emma didn't wait for questions. She started talking. "I was 14 when it happened," she began. "His name was David Miller. He was a senior, 18. We only dated for a few months in secret. When I found out I was pregnant, he'd already graduated and left for college. I never told him." She took a shaky breath. "My parents, they were all about appearances. My father was running for city council. My mother was leading the abstinence program at church. I was terrified of disappointing them, of ruining their perfect life." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Martinez asked gently. "I convinced myself that if I ignored it, it would somehow go away. By the time I couldn't hide it anymore, I felt trapped. I wore loose clothes, made excuses not to go swimming. No one noticed, or maybe they didn't want to notice." Emma's voice broke as she described the night of the birth. "I was so scared. She was so beautiful, so perfect. I named her Grace in my head. I thought I was protecting her, somehow. Protecting everyone. But I was just a scared kid, making the worst mistake of my life." But Emma's confession wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. As Detective Martinez dug deeper into the Thompson family history, she discovered something that changed everything. While reviewing old security footage from a nearby gas station that happened to capture part of the Thompsons' backyard, she noticed something strange on the night in question. The footage showed not one, but 2 figures in the backyard that night. When confronted with this evidence, Emma broke down completely. "I didn't bury her alone," she whispered. "Mom helped me." The revelation stunned everyone involved in the case. Linda Carson was brought back in for questioning, where she finally revealed the truth she'd hidden for 2 decades. She had known about Emma's pregnancy all along. "I found her pregnancy test in the trash," Linda admitted, her perfectly maintained composure finally cracking. "I watched her trying to hide it, but I didn't say anything. I thought if I ignored it, she'd find a solution. When I heard her in the bathroom that night, I knew what was happening. I went to help her, but by then..." Linda's involvement cast the entire case in a new light. She hadn't been an oblivious mother. She'd been an active participant in covering up her granddaughter's death. The case shocked the community of Cedar Park. The story made national headlines. Mother and daughter's 20-year secret unearthed in Texas suburb. Both Emma Thompson and Linda Carson were arrested. The medical examiner's report revealed that baby Grace had been born alive and healthy, making this a case of infanticide. However, considering the circumstances and the passage of time, the district attorney offered plea deals to both women. Emma pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and received 5 years of probation. Linda pleaded guilty to helping conceal a death and received 3 years of probation. Both were required to undergo extensive counseling. The baby, officially named Grace Thompson on her death certificate, was finally given a proper burial in the Cedar Park Cemetery. The service was attended by hundreds of community members, many of whom left teddy bears and flowers at the tiny grave. James Thompson resigned from his position as a real estate developer and moved away from Texas. Jason and Katie Thompson struggled to reconcile their memories of their childhood with this new reality. The perfect family they thought they'd grown up in had been built on secrets and silence. In the months following the discovery, more details emerged about the 20 years between Grace's death and the discovery of her remains. Emma had carried the weight of her secret through high school graduation, through college in Oregon, as far from Texas as she could manage, through her marriage to a kind man named Thomas Wright who knew nothing about her past. She'd never had other children, couldn't bear the thought of it. Linda had thrown herself into church activities and charity work, as if trying to atone for her role in her granddaughter's death. Her marriage to James had crumbled under the weight of unspoken truths. Neither of them could look at each other the same way after that night, though James never knew why. The Thompson house had been sold in 2010 after the divorce. It passed through several owners before being sold to developers in 2023. Each time someone new moved in, Emma and Linda had held their breath, wondering if this would be when their secret finally came to light. Cedar Park had changed a lot in 20 years, growing from a quiet suburb into a bustling city. But some things hadn't changed. The way neighbors looked out for each other, the way communities came together in times of crisis. After the story broke, local women's organizations established a support network for teenage mothers. The high school implemented a more comprehensive sex education program, despite some initial resistance. The church where Linda had once led the abstinence program now offered counseling services for young parents. The old Thompson house was eventually demolished, but before the shopping complex was built, the developers agreed to create a small memorial garden in one corner of the property. A simple plaque reads, "In memory of Grace Thompson, 2003, and all the children whose stories went untold." 5 years after Grace's discovery, Emma Thompson Wright finally found a measure of peace. She'd gone through extensive therapy, divorced her husband, who couldn't handle the truth about her past, and started working with organizations that help teenage mothers. In a rare interview with a local newspaper, Emma reflected on the choices she'd made as a frightened teenager. "I think about Grace every day," she said. "Not just what happened that night, but who she might have been. Would she have had my dark hair? Would she have loved books like I do? I'll never know, but I can honor her memory by helping other young girls who feel as scared and alone as I did." Linda Carson moved to a small town in New Mexico where nobody knew her story. She volunteers at a crisis pregnancy center, though she never shares her personal connection to the cause. Every June 15th, she sends flowers to Grace's grave. The truth about what happened in the Thompson house that night in 2003 finally came to light, but it left behind more questions than answers. Questions about family, about secrets, about the choices we make in moments of fear and desperation. Questions about how well we really know the people closest to us. The case had far-reaching implications beyond the Thompson family. David Miller, the father of Grace, was located and informed about what had happened. He had gone on to become a high school teacher in California, married with 3 children of his own. The news devastated him. "If I had known," he said in a statement, "things might have been different, but we were both just kids, and now all I can do is live with the knowledge that I have a daughter I'll never know." Jason Thompson, Emma's older brother, struggled with guilt over not noticing his sister's pregnancy. He became an advocate for mental health awareness in schools, speaking about the importance of really seeing the people in our lives, of asking the difficult questions. Katie Thompson, the youngest sibling, found herself unable to have children of her own. She couldn't help but see it as some kind of cosmic justice for her family's sins, though her therapist worked hard to help her move past this belief. Today, the story of Grace Thompson serves as a powerful reminder of how secrets can destroy families, how fear can drive people to unthinkable actions, and how the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of coming to light. The metal box that held Grace's remains is now part of a traveling exhibition about criminal justice and social change. The baby bracelet, preserved in a clear case, serves as a powerful symbol of lives cut short and secrets kept too long. Cedar Park has changed. The shopping complex built on the old Thompson property is busy with everyday life, but the memorial garden in the corner serves as a quiet reminder. People still leave flowers there, especially teenage girls who understand all too well the fear and desperation Emma must have felt. The case has become required reading for law enforcement agencies across the country, not just for its forensic aspects, but as a study in how family dynamics and societal pressures can lead to tragedy. The story of Grace Thompson and her family reveals uncomfortable truths about our society, about the pressure to maintain perfect appearances, about the ways we fail our children when they need us most, about the devastating consequences of shame and silence. But it also shows us something about redemption, about the possibility of healing even after the most terrible mistakes, about the importance of speaking truth no matter how long it's been buried. Emma Thompson's final statement in court perhaps says it best. "I made a choice 20 years ago that I can never take back. I was young and scared and wrong, but the bigger mistake was letting that fear silence me for 20 years. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that secrets don't protect anyone. They only cause more pain." The truth about what happened in Cedar Park that night in 2003 finally came to light. Not because anyone chose to reveal it, but because time and progress literally unearthed it. Sometimes, it seems, the earth itself conspires to reveal what we try to hide. But perhaps the most important lesson from this tragic story is also the simplest. That we need to create a world where no scared teenager feels so alone, so trapped, that burying a secret seems like the only option. Grace Thompson never had a chance to live her life, but her story lives on, a powerful reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way to the light. The case of the Thompson family serves as a cautionary tale, a heartbreaking reminder of how secrets can destroy lives, and ultimately a call to create a more compassionate and understanding world. For the residents of Cedar Park, Texas, the old saying rings particularly true: the truth will out. Sometimes it just takes 20 years and an excavator to dig it up.